everybody. My name is Vikki Spruill, and I'm the President and CEO at the New England Aquarium, and I want to welcome you to our very first Harborside chat. I'm sitting here in my office at the New England Aquarium. We're hoping to do a series of these conversations over the next several months, interviewing all the really cool people who make the New England Aquarium and our Anderson Cabot Center for Ocean Life what it is. And we are very fortunate to have with us today to kick off the series Dr. Whitney, who is our, I've got to get this straight because I don't want to mess up the title, Senior Scientist and Chair of our Fisheries, Science and Emerging Technology Program at the Anderson Cabot Center for Ocean Life. Hi, Nick.
Hi.
And so you do really cool work, and I had the pleasure actually of meeting Nick early in my tenure at the aquarium just a few months ago when we were hosting a dinner with some of our trustees, and I was so impressed by the work that you're doing, and had no idea actually that we were using the kinds of technology we're using to solve conservation challenges. So I'd love to have you tell us a little bit about your program. Start off by just maybe giving us an overview of what you're working on, and then we'll go a little deeper.
Yeah, sure. So the Fisheries, Science and Emerging Technologies program is a program that focuses on some of the real problems that we have in fisheries management today. And we use new technology to address questions that couldn't be addressed in the past. And another one of our signatures is that we, in many cases, work directly with the industry. So we go out on the boats with the fishermen and see what kind of gear they're using, how that impacts the animals that they catch. In many cases, people have to release fish that they catch for various reasons, either because of regulations or in some fisheries, that's just the norm. They're not eating the fish, they're just catching it and releasing it. And a lot of our work focuses on finding out what happens to those fish that are caught and released. The ideal is that they just swim off and they're all fine, and but in reality we know that a lot of them will die anyway. Depending on the species and the fishery, some of them will die anyway just from the stress or injuries they sustain. And so a lot of our work focuses on figuring out exactly how many of those animals survive and then what we can do to maximize the number of animals that survive. So we're using a lot of interesting technology, everything from acoustic telemetry, so tags that ping underwater and tell us when fish swim into the area, and also can tell us whether the fish is dead or alive. Satellite tags that can tell us where sharks go anywhere in the world. A lot of my work focuses on the use of accelerometers, the same technology that's in your iPhone or your Fitbit. And instead of using it to tell how many steps you take during the day, we can use it to tell how many times a shark beats its fins as it's swimming around, and get very fine scale information about whether that animal lives or dies, or how long it takes to recover and start swimming normally again after it's caught. We have one of our new scientists in the program, Dr. Cara Dodge, focuses on sea turtles and specifically endangered leatherback sea turtles. She's using all kinds of interesting technology, including cameras that mount on the turtle, and actually you can get video footage of the turtle swimming around and eating jellyfish, and you can see its natural behavior in the wild. So I would say that's a brief overview of the kind of work that we're doing.
So I want to go back to something you said at the beginning about working in partnership with the fishing industry and with fishermen on the boats. That's really part of the DNA of the New England Aquarium and the Anderson Cabot Center for Ocean Life. What has been your experience with that? You hear a lot about the conservation world maybe not working so collaboratively with the fishing industry. Why have you seen that work, and why is that so important to us?
Yeah, I think there's always the potential for there to be a certain amount of tension there between the conservation groups or scientists who are trying to find out what's happening to animals, and fishermen who are trying to make a living, and in many cases doing work that has been part of their family for generations. We've been very fortunate with the fishermen we work with that they want to know the answer. They want to know what's going to be best for their fishery to keep it sustainable and going on for generations. But it's when I find when you work with the fishermen, with the industry, those people can become the strongest advocates for sustainable management of the fishery. You know, we certainly end up on boats a lot of times with you know, captains who are you know, a little disgruntled about certain management policies. But the ones that we work with, you know, it's great too when you're out there on the water together. It really opens up a line of communication that often doesn't, in trust, yeah, that often doesn't happen. So we get to hear their perspective and how, you know, why are there limits on this fishery? Look at, I mean, every time we put our nets or in our lines in the water, we catch a ton of these fish. Why are you telling us that they're, you know, being overfished? And then from our perspective, we're on the boat long enough and we can kind of tell them about some of the science that we've done and some of the results that we've seen. So it ends up being a great exchange.
That's fabulous, fabulous. So I moved to the Boston area in the late summer, and there was a lot of activity around sharks this summer. You are a shark guy, and I was really surprised to learn that there were sand sharks in the Boston Harbor, which we're overlooking right now, this summer. Tell us a little bit about your shark work and sort of a day in the life of Nick with sharks.
Yeah, well, I was out in Boston Harbor. That's our one of our main scientists, Dr. Jeff Kneebone, who's studying the sand tiger sharks. He started out studying them further south and has found them right here in Boston Harbor, and he's using acoustic telemetry. So he puts tags on the sharks and has receivers down in the water that are listening for those tags. So whenever those sharks come nearby, it tells us exactly when the sharks were there. And he's finding that the Boston Harbor area seems to be a little nursery area for sand tiger sharks. He's finding juvenile sand tiger sharks there within sight of. I was out there with him this summer, and we were within a stone's throw of, you know, houses and streets on the down in Quincy, and so it's very interesting. His animals are coming back year after year. He's finding now. So this is a new thing for us, and he's now finding that those sharks that were here in Boston Harbor this summer are now down off the coast of New Jersey and probably moving south as the winter approaches. But we actually had a photographer, a filmmaker, Andy Mann from National Geographic, who was with us on the water on that trip. And he was here with us for 1 week in July and kind of really came out with us on a lot of different projects we have going in the FSET program, and has put together a pretty cool little video that we're going to be releasing next week. Next week, Monday, is World Fisheries Day. And so to mark,
stay tuned for that, everybody.
Yeah. To mark that, we're going to be releasing this great video that Andy has put together that really highlights all the work that we're doing in FSET.
Oh, that's so exciting. Gosh, there's so much that we could be talking about. You know, one of the other things I am learning is that the Gulf of Maine is warming 99% faster than any other body of water, and so that really means that all of this research that we're doing is being done against really this backdrop of climate change and warming waters. How have you seen that impact the work that you're doing here versus maybe other geographies? What are we learning? I guess my question is, so much of the work that we're doing through the Anderson Cabot Center for Ocean Life is around diagnosing the problems. And you can't do conservation if you don't understand what the problems are. And clearly that's at the heart of, you know, the scientific experiment. But what are you seeing and learning from all of these experiences that help us make smarter conservation decisions? Sure.
Well, one thing I think we're learning is that we don't have the information that we would like to have to really judge the impact of climate change. This is an issue that we had back when I was working in the Gulf of Mexico during the Deepwater Horizon oil blowout, and in trying to figure out what the impacts of that event were going to be on the sharks in the Gulf of Mexico. What you really needed to have was a baseline of long-term shark surveys, and no one had done that. And it's basically because most of the work that we do historically is funded by federal grants in most cases, and it's usually, we get a grant to study one question, and we usually get about 1 year to do it. And And we're very good at that. We're very good at answering those questions, and they tend to be related to fisheries. But in terms of addressing the impacts of climate change and long-term changes, it's very difficult to do that based on what you found from a 1 or 2 year project. So one of the things we're trying to do is, and we've seen, even with those, we've seen anecdotal changes. We have certain shark species that were not traditionally found this far north are now being found here.
Whales too.
And whales, yes, all kinds of strange things going on, and not just the species we work with, but other species. But you know, everything from black sea bass to blue crabs to seahorses are now being found much further north than has traditionally been the case. So one of the things that I hope we can focus on in FSET is developing some long-term monitoring projects that can really help us identify changes over longer periods. One of the projects I'm involved in is a project on nurse sharks in the Florida Keys that's been going on for 26 years. I've been involved in it for 20 on and off. And that's a really incredibly rare to have. And sharks are long-lived organisms in many cases, so they can be a great species to study. These animals are coming back every year to mate in the same place. And we have individual animals that we've seen now for over 20 years that come back every year, and we know their whole life history. So projects like that, I think, are incredibly beneficial, and that's one area where we thought during the Deepwater Horizon event that might be wiped out completely because it's down 70 miles west of Key West, and the prevailing currents, the thought was they may take all that oil right down there and just destroy the reef and everything there. Fortunately, we dodged that bullet, it seems like. But those kinds of long-term projects are the things that can really help you get at those climate change questions, and I think we need to try and get more of those going.
Well, it's actually part of what attracted me to this opportunity at the New England Aquarium, where we've for 50 years been doing deep research and science here, but in other parts of the world as well. When you combine that research and science capacity with the ability to inspire and educate almost 1.5 million visitors every year, that's a really exciting combination. I wonder if you could speak to, you could be working anywhere. Why did you decide to join the Anderson Cabot Center for Ocean Life at the New England Aquarium?
Sure. I mean, one of the big things for me was just the type of research that was done here, and I was longtime friends and colleagues with Dr. John Mandelman, who's our VP and head of the center. But it is a very unique situation. I mean, we have aquariums all over the country that are doing really good conservation work, but New England Aquarium has invested in research and conservation in ways that very few other aquariums have. And so that definitely gives us a unique opportunity. We're on the ground doing the primary research and getting the answers that then other conservation organizations can actually use. We're producing the data that other conservations need in order to make their case. So I think that's one of the huge things here, and also we've already touched on this, but also the tradition of working with the industry
and with the conservation community.
Absolutely, and being a bridge between those two groups.
So I'd love to hear a little bit more about this Andy Man project, because that was, I think the use of video. I mean, here we are on Facebook Live trying to bring all of these experiences to life for people.
Sure.
I think the use of video and technology again helps us give people a window into what's really happening in the ocean. I attended a really wonderful conference put on by MIT's Media Lab last week, and there was a sort of pervasive theme throughout that conference around how difficult it is to just see and understand and know what's going on in the ocean. Obviously, technology can help with that, and we've made huge advances over the last few decades. But how important do you think that is, video technology and just helping people see what's going on?
Yeah, I think it's tremendously important, and especially it was great to work with someone as talented as Andy Mann, who can just in a few days of working with us can capture amazing footage and really put it together in a story that is easily digestible and entertaining and fun for people to watch. But we're also working on with just the scientists ourselves, learning how to capture images and tell our story on our own. So just earlier this week, we had a workshop here at the center hosted by Rob Nelson from UntamedScience.com, who his main focus is communicating science to the public. And so one of his major points was that we as the scientists not only have a responsibility to communicate our research to the public in ways that are digestible. Unfortunately, I don't think most of the people who watch this video are going to read my scientific papers, which I totally understand. So we have to get the information out in other ways. And so we learned about how to use GoPros, how to shoot from different angles, how it can not take over the science, how we can just clip a camera on the side of the boat while we're doing our work and capture footage that then we can hand over to other people to edit and put together in a story. So that's a big focus for us in the center right now, is trying to learn how to communicate the work we're doing and really show it to people.
Over the course of my career, I've done a lot of work around this interface between science and media and science communication. And clearly you're very good at this, but I've seen just a huge shift in the willingness, desire for scientists to want to tell their stories. Are you seeing that shift in the field as you've observed it, and that it's not kind of an either or, like it actually kind of is integrated into your work to be able to talk about it?
Right, yes, absolutely. And it also used to be the case that at least for me in the shark world, if our stories got told outside of the scientific world, it was usually because a film crew came out with us from Shark Week or one of the other channels, and they would film our work, and you never really knew how it was going to end up being presented. They might not necessarily capture the science. They may show your footage in the middle of some kind of shark attack reenactment that is just really sensational. So what I love about what we're doing now is we're taking more control of that, and we're taking more responsibility for that, so we can actually communicate the actual science and not just provide content for shows that may or may not represent it well.
So let's talk a little bit more about sharks. What's the thing that surprised you the most this season? You've had a pretty active field season, and maybe it's not sharks that you want to focus on, but there's been a lot going on in the water, a lot of whale mortality, seal mortalities, just sharks showing up everywhere. What have you sort of seen that has been most surprising maybe over this last season?
Yeah, well, I guess locally some of the things we've seen are maybe not surprising, but things that we kind of thought would probably happen now for the past few years, which is more white shark encounters with humans around Cape Cod beaches, including a couple very unfortunate incidents, and so that's been something we've kind of seen coming, and it's something we're going to have to continue to deal with as we go forward. People are going to have to change the ways they use the ocean and the beaches, most likely, and look at it more as a national park, which it is, a national seashore, an area for the wildlife to thrive, and maybe not as much for humans to think they can just go in the water, and be perfectly safe. The ocean it's not a safe place. We're
entering their environments.
Absolutely, absolutely. As far as my personal research, one of the things that was really surprising is with our nurse shark work down in the dry Tortugas, we actually had one of the animals. I talked about how we recaptured these animals that we've known for 20 years. For the first time, we captured an adult female nurse shark who was actively mating, which is what they do down there at that time of year. She had a pit tag, a little implanted tag, just like your pets get. Your cats and dogs have a little tag in their neck. We put those in our sharks. And we read the number and knew she had been tagged before, but couldn't figure out when or where we had tagged her. And finally looked back into our old logs, We had first captured her 18 years ago as a little juvenile nurse shark in the same place. And so this was the first time that we had been able to monitor one of our sharks from the time they were just a little baby all the way up into adulthood, and now she's reproducing.
Oh, that's so
they're in the
neat.
same population.
That's
so
awesome.
that was one highlight from our work.
So that's a great example of how technology has really helped you be able to see that lifespan of
Absolutely,
that animal.
and the kind of thing you can do when you have a long-term study that goes on year after year.
So we've gotten a couple of questions from people who are watching us, and I want to ask you this one. So, you know, what do you wish people knew about the program that you're working in and its research that they might not know about?
Wow, that's a good question. I think I wish people knew that we actually spend a lot of our time trying to get funding for our work. There really is. If I think about the public perception of our work, people think, oh, you work at the New England Aquarium, so the New England Aquarium pays for you to go out and do all of this work. And the aquarium does fund a lot of our work in sort of keeping us going. But we spend a tremendous amount of time trying to write proposals and bring in grants to fund that work.
Right.
And any of the projects I've talked about the reason they exist is because we've been able to submit a competitive proposal and someone chose us as being the best group to do this specific project.
So there's sort of a business side to this work that is often underappreciated.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And also it's not just going to the work isn't just going to get done because the New England Aquarium continues to exist and employ scientists. So I guess that's one thing that comes to mind in terms of when I talk to people and what they don't know about our program.
Yeah, and so I think it's important. So for anybody out there watching, if you're interested in this work, we always need your support and appreciate that. Well, so I think we're actually out of time. We could go on forever talking about this. Thank you so much, Nick, for the important work that you're doing, and thanks for taking the time to share some of that with the folks who are watching us today.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.